All right, this is part 14 of our tile-based top-down shooter game. And in this video, we're going to talk about improving the way our really not very intelligent zombies move around. So for this video, what I've done is I've added a bunch more zombies here onto the map so that all these zombies will spawn over on the other side of the house by the trees, so that when we run our program, you can see the main problem we have with our zombies, which is they all come running at me, and as you can see, eventually they're going to clump up and just become one zombie. I can't even tell how many are chasing me, right? This is kind of a problem because I can't tell how many zombies I'm fighting, but also it just doesn't look good, right? So we want to have a little bit of behavior on our zombies. I don't really want to call it AI because who ever heard of an intelligent zombie? But I want them to have some sort of behavior where they don't just bump into each other. And then we can talk about some other things we can have them do, but I definitely don't want them clumping up like that. So what do we want to happen? Well, right now, if we go down to our mobs here, our mobs are, oops, I went too far down. Our mobs are just pointing themselves at the player and accelerating in that direction. Right, so they're just heading straight for the player. And that's fine, but that makes them clump up. So to make them avoid each other, we want them to move away from any other mobs that have gotten too close to them. And to illustrate that, let's look at a picture here. So I drew a little diagram here. So here I've got a couple of different mobs, right? And so looking at this mob here in the center, this green arrow represents that it wants to head straight for the player. But then it's going to have an avoid radius. It's going to have a circle where it's going to look for any other mobs that are inside that circle. And those are the ones that are close to it. And those mobs are going to generate vectors pushing it away from them. So these two red arrows are just pointing directly away from the other mobs. And then this one over here, this one doesn't affect it at all because it's outside the radius. And the size of this radius will be something that we can adjust to get the behavior we want. So all three of these are going to be unit vectors. So they have a length of 1. They're just giving us direction, right? So we have this direction, and this direction. If we add them up, we get this dotted line vector, and then we take that dotted line and we multiply it by the mob speed to get the right length. And so this is the direction that the mob will accelerate in. So it's not going to head straight for the player. It's going to head sort of towards the player, but off to the side. And the same thing will happen to these other zombies. This zombie will be heading sort of in this direction because it'll be wanting to get away from this one, and so forth. So that'll keep the mobs from getting right on top of each other. Okay, so we're going to go over to our settings here. We've got some mob settings. I'm going to add an avoid radius, and we're just going to call that 50 pixels. It's a nice round number to pick for now. And remember, we have that mob speed. That's the length we're going to make our acceleration vector. So here in the update, what we want to do is we want to take our acceleration, and we're going to make our acceleration just be a unit vector to start with, right? To get that green arrow that I showed you in the picture. And then we're going to say avoid mobs. So I'm going to define a little method here that's going to go and figure out all those other vectors and give us the sum. And then we can say take our acceleration and scale it to whatever our mob speed is. Okay, so now we can just define our avoid mobs function. And what this is going to do is it's just going to go through and loop through all the mobs. right? It's going to loop through all the mobs. And we don't want to include ourself, so we'll skip over the mob that is the zombie that we're currently looking at. And then we want to see what the distance is between the two. Well, that's just self.pos minus mob.pos, right? That's going to give us the arrow pointing from this mob to the zombie we're concerned with. So there's an arrow pointing from the mob towards it. So that's the direction we want to move in, because we want to move away from the other mob. Now, if the length of that vector is less than 50 and greater than 0, because if two mobs do happen to get on top of each other, then their length is going to be 0. So we want to take our acceleration and we just want to add that distance normalized, which is make it a length of 1. Right, so now that's what's going to get us each of those little red arrows from the diagram, right? Let's call it up one more time here. So we're looping through, saying look at every mob. So looks at this one, too far away. Looks at this one, oh, that's ourself, we don't look at that. Looks at this one and says, okay, our position minus the mob position gives us this vector, which normalized will be a length of 1. And same with this one, right? And then we just keep adding them together to the acceleration we already have. We add this one, then we add this one, and that's going to give us our final direction. So now we have the final direction, and we scale that to length. All right, and then, oh, and I noticed I wrote 50 here. I meant to say this should be avoid radius, right? Because we want to be able to adjust that if it turns out it's not working very well, or we want the mobs to look further away or not so far away. So let's take a look at it and see how it turns out. Okay, so I'm going to run over here to where all these mobs are, and remember how it looked last time, where they all clumped up together and went on top of each other. And look at that, that looks so much better. These zombies are clumping up, but they are staying spread out. It also helps them get around obstacles, because they're going to push each other around. And it means that these zombies have become a bit more challenging, because as they get close to you, they're going to start to surround you on all sides, because they will fan out. See that? So you got to be really careful not to let them get you in a corner, because you're not going to be able to get out. So that looks a lot better. Okay. Now another thing we can do to keep the mobs from looking so all the same is adjust their speeds a bit. Make some of them a little faster and some of them a little slower, right? Maybe some of the zombies are a little bit more decayed and don't move quite as fast. And so we can, instead of them all being this mob speed, each zombie we spawn will either add or subtract a little bit from that. So how about we instead make this a list, and we say these are the speeds they could have, right? Some of them will be 150, some of them will be some of them will be 100, maybe 75, maybe 125, right? I've just got a range of a few different speeds, right? And if you want to, you can add, make 150 in there twice, you would get it more often, that kind of thing. So we can spread it out, just so it's not totally random. I could do a rand range between 75 and 150, and then one mob might have a speed of 87 and one mob has a speed of 93, and that kind of thing. I just want a few different ranges. So I'm going to just have this little list. So over here on my mob, I can just say when this mob spawns, its self.speed is going to be a random choice, which means I need to go up here and import choice from random as well. Right? So speed is going to be choice, mob speeds. Right? And then here we just scale it to our self.speed. Okay, so that way our zombies will have different speeds. So let's take a look and see how that looks. That's a slow one. Yeah, so you see how some of them are trailing behind a little bit. Not bad. That 75 might be a little too slow. So you really got to be careful to get them. They're going to try and get on all sides of you, and your poor, pathetic little gun can only shoot in one direction. Still not too hard, though. And that's okay. We're not trying to make the game, we're not trying to get the final balancing done yet and make the game super hard. We're just trying to get the basic functions working, and then we will adjust as we go, because you're never going to get it perfect the right first time, and then you're going to add something and then it's not going to be right anyway. So you want to get the mechanics working first before you worry about all the little balance details, like how much damage does each bullet do and how fast does each zombie run, right? We're going to wind up adjusting those things anyway as we go. Okay, so that'll do it for this video. It was pretty painless. It's a pretty small amount of code we added here to give us a big improvement in how our zombies move around the map. Those of you who've been watching my in-depth videos on steering behaviors, you probably see where some of this is headed. We're going to want to have the zombies just wander around randomly. Right now they chase the player from all the way across the map. And so we'll want to make it so that the zombies can only chase the player if they're inside a certain range. And so we'll gradually start adding some more of those behaviors to get the zombies to look even better. All right, and as usual, please click the like button below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next video.